Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Right. Sean Adel Tabata Boy. Now, you've heard him mentioned once or twice on this programme over the last 2.5 years. He's the self-styled editor-in-chief at the clickbait website Your Newswire, which we've spoken a bit about on the programme in the past. Now, interestingly enough, the Sunday Times ran a story on Sean Adel and the website Your Newswire yesterday. And I'm not going to read all of the article, but I'm going to share bits and pieces. Am I going to be selective in the bits and pieces I share? No, I'm not. I'm going to give you the gist of the article. So it starts off basically, the man behind one of America's biggest fake news websites is a former BBC worker from London whose mother writes many of the stories. Adel Tabata Boy, 35, runs yournewswire.com, the source of scores of dubious news stories, including claims the Queen threatened to abdicate if the UK voted against Brexit. That story was shared more than 23,000 times on Facebook. The site was also instrumental in spreading a conspiracy theory before the US election, falsely claiming that there was evidence connecting Hillary Clinton to a paedophile ring in Washington. It's been blacklisted, yournewswire.com, by a number of fact-checking bodies, including the European Union's East Stratcom Task Force, which is in Brussels, and that's a unit that debunks Russian propaganda. One story published on the site Your Newswire warned of a plot by the US deep state to assassinate Trump, blame it on Russia, and then allow Obama to continue in power under martial law rule. So the Sunday Times quoted a former US intelligence officer and an expert on Kremlin propaganda who said that Your Newswire was used by the Russians, whether Adel was aware of it or not. A lot of nonsense there, I think. Harding, this guy, went on to say that it's one of the biggest websites. He's prolific. He's really good in that he produces a lot of high-volume stories that are picked up by a lot of others, cited and referenced. Adel did respond and did answer the call from the Sunday Times journalist and said that Your Newswire is a legitimate news organisation. And as he said that, his nose grew by 4.5 inches. And he said any alleged links with Russia were baseless. In that, I have no doubt Adel is telling the truth for the first time since I've known him. Completely baseless that Russia had anything to do with it. I would agree with that. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They talked about Adel working for BBC and MTV, and they talked about him running for a brief time the website of David Ike, davidike.com. They talked about him attempting to become the first gay man to get married in the UK. He failed at that as well. They said he operates out of a luxury apartment block overlooking a golf course in his husband's hometown of Los Angeles. The Sunday Times went on to say the site carries a mixture of conspiracy theories, real news stories, such as last week's Supreme Court vote on Brexit, and demonstrably fake news, including a recent report that the Queen had been placed under house arrest. The story went on to say his mother is one of his main contributors, with thousands of articles under her name, and they quoted his mother. I did meet his mother a couple of times in London. I found her reasonably pleasant and a pretty all-right sort of person. But what they did say, interestingly enough, was that another prolific writer on the site goes by the name of Baxter Dimitri, and that the photograph next to the author's name was in fact that of a Latvian computer programmer who told the Sunday Times he wasn't Dimitri Baxter and that his identity had been stolen. The photograph has since been changed, alleges the Sunday Times, to a picture of a different man. Now, this is something raised on this programme months ago when one of our listeners was able to track down one of the photographs, or one of the images being attributed to Baxter Dimitri was in fact a former sound man at the People's Voice who, to the best of our knowledge, didn't know that his image was being used by Sean Adel. So a Latvian guy is basically saying, according to the Sunday Times, is that Adel has stolen his identity. Is that true? I don't know. The Sunday Times are saying it, though. They also say this weekend, Google has banned yournewswire.com from its advertising platform. Basically, it's removed its ability to generate funding through AdSense. So now if you click on a story that takes you to yournewswire.com, they don't get any money. Right? Coincidentally, today, the Commons Culture, Media and Sport Committee in London launched an inquiry into fake news. So, never having been a petty man in my life, never having been a triumphalist even, easy for you to say, never having been triumphalist in my life, I don't jump around and leap around with joy that Sean Adel and Your Newswire has been exposed for what it is. I don't take any great pleasure in the tone of the story in the Sunday Times yesterday, even though I think the accuracy of the story, I don't think there's any doubt about it. Now, Adel has been boasting on Facebook that Murdoch has been targeting him, such is the narcissistic makeup and personality of Sean Adel. I don't think Rupert Murdoch could give a shit about Your Newswire or about Sean Adel. But I see the bigger picture, I think. While it's easy to laugh and mock Adel, and I must be honest and say I did contact the Metropolitan Police in London to suggest to them that they have a look into the allegations made about stealing people's identities, because that's a very serious criminal offence. Libel is a civil matter, and we know that the character Baxter Dimitri on Your Newswire libelled several people, making allegations about sexual abuse and child sexual abuse against a number of people without any evidence or any sort of corroborating journalism, witnesses, anything to back it up at all. But libel is a civil offence. Identity theft, if indeed Adel is guilty of that, is a criminal offence. So the Metropolitan Police got back to me today and said, you should contact Ipso Richie. That's the independent press complaints thing here in the UK. And I got back to them and said, that's outrageous. It's not a civil matter. It's not a press matter. If the Sunday Times are right, this guy has committed a crime and he should be questioned as to the legitimacy of the claims or the authenticity of the claims made by the Sunday Times. Look, Your Newswire was always garbage. Sean Adel is an idiot. The people working with him, excluding his mother, because as I said, I wouldn't cast aspersions on anybody's mother, and I found her to be a pleasant woman when I met her. But everybody else associated with that guy is an idiot. And I never gave a damn about their existence. I never wanted anybody to be shut down. Our whole raison d'etre for talking about Your Newswire was to point out what's going on in the so-called independent media. But what we've seen over the weekend and what we will see ongoing is complete imbeciles like Adel and Your Newswire used. So they use this example of guys putting out crap. I mean, today there's a claim that Donald Trump is going to imminently address the public on aliens. And not on illegal aliens, but on the little green men type aliens. Bollocks. Another one said that California has decided not to give federal taxes, to pay federal taxes until Trump is impeached. Nonsense. This is the garbage. But it's harmless garbage. So there's no joy in the fact they're going after him, because they're going to use this as an example. They're going to cite this as dangerous when it isn't. It's just ludicrous. And they're going to go after real purveyors of information. Researchers in the genuine independent media, which you can probably count now on two hands. So I take no joy in it whatsoever. None. I would like to see the police in London open a file on Adel and look into the claims made in the Sunday Times about him stealing identities. That is deadly serious, that. But outside of that, Your Newswire can carry on with their bullshit stories all day long. I would rather alert people to the idiocy of them, tell them who's behind it and why, and let them get on with it. But it's very sinister. Very sinister. I'm going to leave that. What we have seen, though, is how lucrative this sort of garbage is. I mean, the Times said the guy was living in a luxury apartment on a golf course in Los Angeles. 23,000 clicks on the bullshit Queen story about the Queen abdicating. Massive amounts of money in that. And I talked about this the other day. I think for the first time in my life, I coined a phrase. Truth or industrial complex. That's what it is. Guys like Adel at the heart of it. Not interested in educating anybody about what's going on. Not interested in building a platform for researchers to speak to large audiences and to demonstrate what they've learned. No, it's all about making quick money. But still, don't jump for joy at Adel's seeming demise as a clickbait entrepreneur, because what's really behind that is they're going to go after those who are really making a difference and who are changing people's opinions and making people think again and have a long, hard look at the world and what's going on. It's very serious.